Hello, and welcome to the FullQuota webinar, Only Fools Write Bad Content. This is a recorded version of a webinar we delivered on April 1st, 2013. My name is Reed Overfelt. I'm the CEO of FullQuota. I want to thank you for spending this time with us. I'd like to start this conversation with a dialogue about what's changed with target buyers, your target buyers. If you think back even 5 years ago, you had a buyer that was largely web agnostic. What I mean by that is they were consuming information via a set of direct channels, phone calls, direct mail, email, news, advertising, etc. That buyer today is now largely web-centric, and they consume that same information about the problems that they want to solve by a set of online channels. In fact, they've changed so much that you have a buyer now who is in business-to-business marketing, self-servicing through the buying process. What I mean by that is they're going 70% of the way through the buying process before they ever contact somebody. Think about that, 70%. That means they've identified the problem they're trying to solve. They have an answer to that problem, and they have a good understanding of what it's going to cost them to solve the problem before they ever contact anybody. And that has profound implications to the way you need to be thinking about both sales and marketing today. In the past, it was about getting in front of your target buyer. Today, it's about getting found by that buyer when they come looking for an answer to a specific business problem. And the idea of getting found actually itself has changed in even the last year or so. You still have to, of course, get found in the search engine. That's critical, in fact, the most important. You need to still get found in the top 3 organic search results versus paid results. But getting found today means something even broader. It also means that you need to get found in a set of online channels, social channels, and other channels where your target buyer is actually hanging out. That might be LinkedIn if you're in business to business. We're going to talk about that in the rest of the webinar. It could be another set of channels as well as Twitter, LinkedIn, Google Plus, and others today. You also need to be thinking about industry-level blogs. It's not just getting your blog found, it's also getting found in places where your target buyer is actually hanging out, which is not necessarily in your blog. It might be an industry-level blog. It also means getting found in a set of mobile experiences. One of those is a reading experience where you're pulling together and aggregating together blog content. Flipboard is one of the more popular of those. It also means mobile search. Google Voice Search is starting to drive very profound changes in the way that you get found. Why is that? Because people speak full sentences into a voice search experience, and you need to respond to that with content that addresses those questions. So the question I always get about this point in the conversation is how do you do that? How do you get found in search on a set of social channels, a set of mobile experiences, and industry-level blogs? And it starts with you retooling and rethinking the way that you think as a marketer. You need to stop thinking like a marketer, and you need to start thinking like a publisher and a socializer. What I mean by that is you need to start creating content that your target buyer actually loves and will enjoy and will use. What I mean by that is content that is meaningful and relevant. It includes top-notch blog articles, new market data, industry research based on surveys, reports, and studies, and educational content. Things your target buyer can actually use every day to solve business problems in their business. So if I'm in a live audience, I usually get a set of hands that say, that sounds great, but you're still not telling us how to do that. And that's the point of today's webinar. There are 6 things that you need to do to create really good content, content that gets you found today. And that's what we're going to talk about. First of those, and probably the most important, and the one thing I hope that you leave this discussion with is that understanding your target buyer is the most important thing you need to do today. What I mean by that is you need to sit down and actually interview that buyer. That buyer is critical to understand. I'm not talking about understanding your market, understanding the companies that you sell to. I'm talking about the individual that you're buying that's going to buy from you today. For most of you that are attending this webinar, you're selling to other businesses. That most likely means you're selling to a C-level individual, or at least you're trying to sell to a C-level individual. And what you need to know is that person is very different from anyone else you're going to try to market to. And the reason for that is that that person has unrelenting demands on their schedule. They're usually in meetings from 8 o'clock in the morning until 5 o'clock at night. They may even eat lunch in that meeting. They hate being pitched to. They have a very close group of friends and inner circle that they trust to make decisions with them, and they're very quick studies. Why are they quick studies? Because they don't have any time. They're in meetings from 8 o'clock until 5 o'clock at night. They have 15 minutes maybe in the afternoon, 15 minutes before they head home, and maybe an hour before they get started with their day. They don't have time. And that really has important implications for the way that you need to think about providing value to them. In fact, if you're thinking about content, you provide them with marketing content, they're not going to read it. And the reason for that is that they're very return on time invested in the way they read. They're thinking about, if I read this, am I going to get some value from it? Can I use this today? Am I going to get something that I wouldn't have had 5 minutes ago or 15 minutes ago? Right? And so what are they looking for? They're looking for outcomes-based content and conversations that help them drive their business forward. Prescriptive value and case-based discussions. What I mean by that is, it's a case study. There's a problem that somebody had, they solved it, and then tell them about the 7 steps it takes to actually solve that problem. Input from peers, relationships, and connections to other higher level thinking, things that they probably weren't thinking about in their business, or reminding them about things they should be thinking about in their business, delivered from a point of expertise to them. They love that. The point here is that you need to understand that buyer. You need to understand that their time is valuable, and that you're going to have to give them things that help them solve problems in their business. If you have marketing content about your products and services, they're not going to read it. They don't care. What they want to do is solve a problem. And that has important implications for your content marketing. It's the first step in a really good, thoughtful content marketing program. You've had to drive everything else from this point forward. So you've identified this target buyer, you've interviewed them, you called them, you've asked them about what sort of matters most to them, and now you're going to map your content to that target buyer. This is a template that we use. I'll give you a little orientation to it. On the left-hand side, you have the buyer's objective. For those who are in sales, the steps on the side from vague notion of a possible solution down to purchase are the solution selling steps. At the very top, you have pipeline stages, top of the funnel, middle of the funnel, and bottom of the funnel. Top of the funnel is all about generating awareness and ensuring that that buyer understands that you have an answer to their problem. Middle of the funnel is about guiding them to actively consider you as an answer to that problem. And bottom of the funnel is about getting them to purchase to solve that problem. At each stage in the pipeline process, there's an outcome, which is at the very bottom, or a set of key outcomes. At the top of the funnel, it's all about getting people to subscribe, open, view, and share your content. And there's kinds of content that are important there. Trend reports, articles, newsletters, those kinds of things are really important for driving those kinds of key outcomes. In the middle of the funnel, it changes a bit. It's about following and downloading, participating and inquiring, getting them to convert and raise their hands to become leads. In that case, step-by-step ebooks are great. Q&A ebooks are fantastic. Demos, case studies, all those are really critical to helping guide that person through the sales process. And then finally, as they move to the bottom, pricing guides, checklists, those kinds of things are critical to helping them engage and buy from you going forward. The point here is that you need to create a map of content. That content should span the entire sales cycle from top to bottom. And those pieces of content should be thoughtfully created so that they're guiding somebody to make a purchase from you, not from your competitors. The next thing is you need to create an editorial calendar, and that calendar is really critical. What you need to understand up front is that your target buyer, and anyone, quite frankly, processes information in very small bite-sized chunks. So you need to give them content in little bite-sized pieces. This is a content progression or content calendar that we use for one of our clients. You'll notice that it has a progression. There's different kinds of content. There's a schedule, and there's an outcome for each piece of content. So in the first piece, it's an email industry that announces this industry report, right? That's sent out on day one. Our outcome we're trying to drive is to open, share, and download, right? We're also going to publish that on a set of social channels. You'll notice the content schedule progression. It's day 1, day 5, day 7, and as the date gets closer to a potential webinar or other things, it'll be 23, 24, 25. The point here is that it's critical that you have a schedule, that you actually stick to that schedule and you build it out for every one of your campaigns, okay? And it needs to be thoughtful, it needs to be out in pieces, and it needs to be sustained. Content marketing is not something you do once and then walk away from it. That's thinking like a marketer. If you're thinking like a publisher and a socializer, you're creating a content calendar that spans the course of a year even, which is what we do for our clients. Okay, next up is actually creating content. What are you going to do? What's required to create meaningful and relevant content? There's a lot, actually. What I want to do is give you some really critical sort of do's and some don'ts. The most important one of those is that if you're going to write content, make sure that it focuses on topics that are relevant to your target buyer, their role, and their current challenges. What I want to emphasize is the idea of their current challenges. Topics need to be timely and relevant to them, or they're not going to read them. Remember, they're in meetings from 9 to 8 to 5. They're not going to read stuff that's marketing. They're not going to read stuff that's not timely and relevant to them. Remember, they're quick studies. They don't have time. So summarize, 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 summarize. If you're smart, what you'll do is create 50-word versions of your content, 500-word versions of your content, maybe 1,000-word versions of your content, and use those across different channels. Remember that hard facts drive credibility. Credibility is key. You're trying to sell somebody expertise. I know you might sell software, you might sell a piece of technology, and other things, but the reality is they're buying expertise. Okay? And so you need to remember that hard facts and data will drive them to purchase from you. Pick the right channels. Remember, if you've done your job and you've interviewed your target buyer, you know the right channels to participate on with content. And finally, don't forget to push beyond common wisdom and top-of-mind thinking. Right? Give them something that's remarkable. Give them something that'll stand out amongst your peers. Give them something that stands out even amongst the industry level blogs they're reading. Give them something to think about today. Right? There's some don'ts as well. Don't be boring. Remember, this is a contest. You're trying to create content that is better than your competitors, better and gets noticed by your target buyer. Right? So don't be boring. Don't just wing it. You have a plan. Follow it. Doesn't mean you don't need to make adjustments to that plan, but follow the plan. Don't just go and do it and then drop off. If you start creating an audience for your content and you fall away, they'll immediately fade away and they'll never come back. Don't just use one person to write content. Use a couple of people. Use a couple of people. Mix it up. Make it interesting for your reader. In many cases, for our clients, we'll have one writer that writes a kind of positive view of things, and we have another one that writes a kind of contrarian view of things, and we move those things back and forth between each other so that we get this kind of mix of good and bad. Right? Don't start the process and don't critique it. Again, tweak it. Test things. Try new things. Don't be afraid to try new things. We're always trying new content opportunities. We're always looking for best practices to try, and if they work, we use them. So, but again, remember, at the end of the day, it's about creating really good content. So don't forget that part as you're trying new things, and don't step back into being a marketer again. It's not about being creative. It's not about tricking your buyer to read your content. It's not about tricking Google. It's about creating really good content that they'll use in their business today. And so try new things. Try new ways of creating that content for them. All right, next up. So we talked about identifying your buyer, about making sure you're mapping the content, making sure you're actually creating really good content. Now let's talk about optimizing the content. You need to optimize the content for two audiences, your target buyer. If you've done your job in terms of creating a good content calendar, you've thought about your buyer, you're going to create, it'll be optimized for them. The next audience is search, and frankly, search is Google. It is also a little bit of Bing and a little bit of Yahoo, but the reality is, at the end of the day, the one you need to pay attention to is Google. You need to understand what actually motivates Google. So Google's job is to present you and your buyer with the best possible content. And the reason they're going to do that is because if they don't, people will leave. They'll go to Bing and they'll go to Yahoo, and every 1% of market share loss for them is hundreds of millions of dollars in ad revenue. So it's in Google's interest to actually make sure they're presenting the best content. In fact, they've taken this to such a level today that it's pretty clear to us that they want to put the SEO industry out of business. We think it's a good thing, because the SEO industry's job is to trick Google, and they're going to make it very hard for you to do that. So what you need to do is understand what motivates them, which is presenting really good, thoughtful content. You need to help them decide in your favor. So how do you do that? I used to have a slide that actually had this very sort of simplistic view of how Google ranked content. I've stopped doing that because the reality is getting ranked in Google is not simple anymore. In fact, it's quite difficult. Again, the goal here is to make sure that people who are doing the right things get their content ranked. The people who are doing the wrong things, SEO industry, don't. And so that said, there are some factors that you can pay attention to. Of course, this deck will be available after the webinar. There are a set of on-page SEO factors. These are things that you actually can control yourself. They're about the content itself. They're about the HTML and the structure of that HTML and the architecture of the content itself. Right? Did you make it easy for Google to crawl that content? The speed of that content, the URLs you're using, etc. There's also a set of off-page factors, and these are things that you don't control. There are things that are influenced by readers, your other writers, and other publishers today. There's things like links, the social context, the social sharing of your content, trust, and where this content came from. It doesn't mean that you can't affect those. It just means that you don't control them directly today. And they're critically important to getting found. In fact, they're 75% of what's required to get found today. Most people that are looking at this are probably thinking, oh, you got to be kidding. There's no way I'm going to be able to do this. And I'm going to tell you that at the end of the day, I can boil this down to one thing. If you want to get found online today, the key to doing that is creating exceptional and unique content that your target buyer actually loves. I know that's starting to sound like a broken record, but the reality is that's the truth. If you want to get found in a search engine, you want to get found on other channels, create good stuff that your target buyer actually wants to read. Next thing up is socializing your content. So obviously this is critical to getting found in Google because Google pays attention to the context that content gets shared in social context. But it's also critical because your target buyers are hanging out on these channels today. So the key in this is, the key that we always have a conversation with clients about is what are the right channels. So if you've done your homework and you've interviewed your target buyer and you've asked them about where they hang out online, they probably told you today. That said, there's a few things I can tell you about that actually will help you understand the right channels out of the gate. So let's talk about those. So blogging, right up front. So is blogging on your own blog important? It is critically important, actually. In fact, your target buyer is most likely reading more than 2 blogs a day. Again, they're reading them very quickly, but they're reading more than 2 blogs a day. The articles that they're reading have an enormous influence on the purchases that they make, right? Whether it's actually helping them decide on a product or finding choices or getting answers to a business problem, assuring them, inspiring the purchase, etc. That has an enormous impact on them across the entire buying spectrum today. So the reality is that companies that blog are generating more leads than those that don't. And my advice to any company is that you need to have a blog and you need to blog often. Don't forget, good original content that's meaningful and relevant to your target buyer, stuff they can use in their business every day. Marketing content, forget it. It's useless. Don't even bother with it. Again, blog and blog often. What about LinkedIn? The reality is that LinkedIn is a must-have for business-to-business marketers and B2B companies that are actually trying to engage a business buyer. It drives by far the most referrals to sites, and it drives by far the most leads to companies. Frankly, of the registrants for this webinar, half of them came from LinkedIn. So it's a critical channel for any company that's trying to generate really good, thoughtful business buyers. And so my advice to any company is that LinkedIn is a must for anybody. The one word of caution, LinkedIn requires participation. You cannot just post content to a content feed. No one's reading it. Where content gets found and read is in groups. Groups are the most critical part of LinkedIn, and that requires your active participation. You just can't spam them with content. You got to be a participant in those groups today. How about Facebook? So there's no denying the sheer girth of Facebook. Look, people spend time on it. Does that make it a good channel for your target buyer? I don't know. It means that you need to ask your buyer in their interviews. The reality is, the statistical reality is that it's a better business-to-consumer channel than it is a business-to-business channel. But that doesn't mean that it is for your particular market. So you need to spend time thinking about whether or not this is a channel for you or not. What I advise people is try it. And in your interviews with your target buyer, ask them, okay? Try campaigns, see what works. If it doesn't work and you can't build a community or channel there, then don't worry about it. Don't invest in it. But keep an eye on it, because you never know. It may become a channel that's important to you. Twitter. So the fact about Twitter is packed full of people who are young, smart, affluent, and tech-savvy. They're influencers. They're people who are going to influence your target buyer. Frankly, they're people who write stuff that your target buyer is actually reading today. The key in this is that Twitter plays an enormous role in purchases. I get asked this question all the time, are you kidding? And the answer is yes, it does. And the reason is that you have an influencer who's using Twitter to curate content or ideas for articles they're going to write. And it has an enormous influence on people that are going to purchase your solutions. It's also generally used by the people who sit right underneath your target buyer today. That said, companies that actually do use Twitter are generating more leads, and they're generating more business, and they're getting better outcomes for using Twitter. My suggestion to you is Twitter's all about influence. You should start tweeting relevant, original content that really matters to your target buyer, but stuff that you really want to get shared, right? This is a share channel. Paid search. So the reality is that we're not big fans of paid search to advertise your products, your services, and your brand. It's expensive, it's ineffective, it doesn't work. However, it does work really well if you use it to advertise content that answers business problems for your target buyer today. It works incredibly well, actually. And so the key here is to have a piece of content use paid search to advertise that content, whether it's a ebook, a webinar, a blog posting, doesn't matter, okay? But it's a piece of content. It's not your brand, it's not your products, it's not your services today. And then make sure you're targeting your keyword sets against your competitors by brand name. That's the best way, the most cost-effective way to use paid search today, and that's how we use it for our clients. There are other channels, of course. There's Google+, Pinterest, and Instagram. Google+ is must, quite frankly. The reason is that Google gives ranking weight to content that's posted in Google+. It's unfair, but it's the reality, and you need to do it. Is it a channel for your target buyers? If you're selling to marketers, great channel. If you're selling to anyone else, not such a good channel. Pinterest, Instagram, and others, are they good channels? Depends on your target market. And again, you need to be thoughtful about that. Ask your target buyer whether or not they actually think that's the right thing to do, that they're using it today. Finally, we've picked some channels. I also want to point out that you need to make it really easy for people to share your content. And what I mean by that is that if you have a blog, you need to make sure you have share to social capability. Remember, don't put 10,000 share buttons on there. Put the 5 or 3 or 2 or 1 channel that your target buyer is actually using and post that one. Okay? If you have an ebook, put in the very bottom in the footer or in the header, share this. Make sure share capabilities. They don't have to actually, they shouldn't be follow us, they should be share the content. All you care is that somebody shares your content. You don't care if they follow you, make sure that they share it. Demos, newsletters, webinars. If you have a webinar in the email invite, make sure that they actually have a share social capability in those. In the thank you page, once they've registered, share this with your peers in there. Key is make sure you share it. Okay. So with that said, let's talk a little bit about what it actually takes to create really great content. Content that your target buyer is actually going to use. So let's recap. So the first thing up, and again, and probably the most important thing I want you to leave this session with, or this conversation with, is that you need to understand your target buyer. Not your market, not the company, the buyer. You need to understand what motivates them, who they really are, and what value you can provide to them. You need to then map your content across the entire buying life cycle from top of the funnel to bottom of the funnel. Next up, you need to create an editorial calendar that takes your content and feeds that content to your target buyer in very small pieces. And the key in that is to make sure you create the calendar and stick to it. Okay? You need to create meaningful content that your target buyer is going to actually be able to use. That's content that helps them solve a problem that's immediate for them today. Right? Be thoughtful about it. No marketing content. Remember, you're a publisher. You need to optimize that content for your target buyer and for search engines. Remember what motivates Google. And then think about creating really good, meaningful content that is targeted at your buyer persona. That's the best way to get found online today. And then remember to socialize that content. Pick the right channels. Pick channels that your target buyer is actually participating in. And then remember to make it really easy to share that content today. Okay, so let's recap. So what does it take to create really great content? Well, the first thing you need to do is understand your target buyer. And again, I hope that the one thing I'm leaving you with from this session is that that's the most critical thing you need to do today. You need to understand the buyer, not the company, not the industry, the individual buyer that you're selling to. You then need to create a content map that maps your content across the entire buying life cycle for that target buyer. You need to create an editorial calendar that actually gives them content in little bite-sized chunks, and remember to stick to it. Don't just create it, throw it in the back corner, and don't use it. You then create really meaningful content, and the key there, again, is to create stuff that your target buyer actually will use. That solves their immediate business challenges, helps them think about things in a different way today. You need to optimize that content for your target buyer. Again, if you've done your job in interviewing your target buyer, you're creating stuff they really want, you've already optimized for them. You also need to optimize for search engines. And again, the key here is to remember what motivates Google and to make sure that you create really good, thoughtful content that they will rank. Okay? You also need to socialize that content. The key here is to pick the right channels. Pick channels that your target buyer is actually participating on today. And then remember, make it super, super easy for your target buyer to share that content today. That's the key goal. I want to thank you again for taking the time to attend the webinar today. If you have any questions or comments or feedback about the session, I'm very good at responding to email. My name is reed.overfelt@FullQuota.com. If you want help creating a content marketing program or helping write content, that's what we do. FullQuota writes about 500 pieces of original content every single month, and we offer a free consultation. It's about an hour and a half investment on your part. We come back and give you a full-blown, very detailed content marketing plan. So